Hey guys, it's Miss Thomas here. So now you've been introduced to the concepts behind the different stages of clay, or the physical properties behind the different stages of clay. Believe me, it'll be very different once you actually get your hands on that clay. You will begin to really notice these differences in these different stages. But I think it's important for us to have an idea of what those stages are before we really get started. So we're going to take notes on these stages of clay. Stages of clay. I titled my notes. So we're first going to start with we're going to leave a little bit section here, and I'll tell you why later. It'll become clear. We're going to start off with wet, and then we're going to go to dry. Just for now, just draw a line down your paper, and we'll fix it to where it needs to go as we move down the page. So that first stage is slip, right? Which is watered down clay. I believe that has a hyphen. Watered down clay. That's what slip is. Woot woot. And it is used for one, attaching clay pieces. This is in the scoring and slipping process. I'm going to get a little bit closer. Which, as we've talked about before a little bit, is known as welding. Oh my gosh. Sometimes my brain moves too fast. Welding clay. It's also used, and we won't be doing any of this, but it's nice to know. It's also used for slip casting. So if you ever see like a perfect looking ceramic sculpture, it was probably slip casted, especially if it was a knickknack or a tchotchke on your grandma's shelf. That was probably slip casted. And then it can also be used as surface decoration. And for us, what that will take the form of eventually, maybe not this year, but definitely next, is underglaze. Underglaze is basically colored slip. So the second stage, which is the stage that we use or work with the most, is called plastic. And no, not like a plastic bottle. It is known as brand new. Oh my gosh, what's this W? Wet, soft clay. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm so sorry. My brain is not present. Voila. All right, so we've got our brand new soft wet clay. And this is the most common working stage. This is what we're going to be working with the most often. All right, and its qualities.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm laughing at your 16 sign because Angie has arrows.
All right, guys. So, yes, the qualities of plastic clay. It's easily molded, so it's very flexible. I'm actually going to put that. All right. And then sometimes the bad thing about it on occasions though is sometimes it's too moist or too wet to hold its own weight. All right. Now we move on to the next phase, which this part gets a little bit easier to deal with. And a ceramicist usually calls this letting something set up. At least that's what the language I would use in my clay studio. For example, if you're throwing, that you use a lot of water on your clay vessel and you have a layer of slip around your clay as you're working your clay on the wheel. When you take it off, it's going to be super wet, super, super plastic. And so you usually let it set up. And you can do that. Some ceramicists will use a butane torch to heat it and get some of that moisture out. You can use a heat gun to get some of that moisture out. It does take longer than the butane torch. More ancient ceramicists or ceramicists working in like I don't know. No, I don't want to say ancient methods, but more traditional methods will use coal, hot coals close to the clay. And in my experience, the Texas sun was really good at setting up my clay so that it would become less plastic and enter into this soft leather hard phase. So you just leave it out for a little bit to get it ready to go if it's too wet. But you don't want to leave it out too long because then it might get stiff leather hard. So soft leather hard qualities. Firm, slightly flexible. Will hold its shape when attaching pieces. So if you are trying to do a slab built box, you want this soft leather hard stage. And then this is also when it's most appropriate for transport. Now we're going to move on to stiff leather hard. And I'm starting to write a little too big, so I need to stop. Qualities. It will hold its shape. It's good for carving. It's more challenging to add pieces, so harder to add pieces. So it's harder to score and slip. And that's what this part is. You can maybe add a new piece of plastic clay if you're working with a stiff leather hard piece, but it's not an easy thing to do. And then it's no longer flexible and it can break if pushed too hard. Can break if pushed. So then we can go to bone dry. And this is the most exciting. Right. Sort of. I don't know why I said that. But it means that your clay is probably going to be, once it's a bone dry stage, it's ready for fire. But it's also very, very fragile. So this is when it's essentially completely dry. Meaning that it is no longer cool to the touch. It's room temperature. And it can take a week to achieve this stage, or even sometimes longer if it's really humid outside. I come from a pretty humid climate as well, but not. I am fast. I will see what it's like working with clay in this environment during the rainy winter season, because it will affect what we're doing. But this is the most important part. It's very fragile in this stage, and this is why you don't want to bring it to me in this stage. We want to get that on the shelf and let it get to its stage before this, because it's basically just dust barely being held together by the tiny little bits of moisture that's still left in there. Basically just dust. Okay, so then what happens is we fire it. First, firing, chemical change. Woot. All right. And you're going to get, and I'm going to actually move this over here. We're going to get Bisqueware. Why? Bisqueware. Fired clay. and it is now ceramic. And it's strong and durable to a point. It is still breakable. But you have to try a lot harder to break it than in a bone die stage or a stiff leather hard phase. And it's ready to be painted, stained, or glazed. So we did this thing where we left a little space here. Prior to that first firing, we call this greenware. So clay that has not yet been fired. My star is not very attractive. Unfired clay. Clay that has not been fired is greenware. So we have our first chemical change of our first firing. And if you choose to glaze your piece, you will get the 7th stage, which is glazeware. Okay, ceramics that have been refired with glaze, creating a glass coating on the surface. All right, so that, my friends, stages of clay. I bet some of you will make way more attractive notes than I have. But just in case you need a moment to see these a little bit closer, bisqueware, clay is now ceramic, strong and durable to a point because it's still breakable. I'm sure you've maybe accidentally broken one of your grandma's tchotchkes or knickknacks, if you want to call them that. But it is also ready, the clay that is ready to be painted, stained, or glazed. And then glazeware, ceramics that have been refired. Ugh, sorry, let me move my little image. And maybe you can see. Refired with glaze, creating a glass coating on the surface. Those are the stages of clay. Excited to work with it. Excited to see what you're going to make. How can I...